There are two versions of my childhood tapes, part 3, a story by Like I Did. I'm going to kill them. With the speed Luke was driving in, we'd get back home in half the time we were supposed to, but I couldn't blame him. With the most recent news, I wouldn't be surprised if my parents were already working on Ellie's audition tape. We don't know that they... I stopped to think over my words. This happened decades ago. I doubt whatever production company that was, it still exists today. Maybe they just wanted to stop by. And that's why none of them are picking up their phones. Luke hissed back. He was right. At this point, we couldn't know what my parents were capable of. We both stayed silent for a while. We were alive and healthy, and from what I sounded like so was Lee, but I'd still evolved a fear for my parents and lost all the respect. I remember them, Luke said all of a sudden. Who? Lee's parents. Our aunt, Dad's sister. And her husband. I swallowed. Why was Luke only giving me truths in small portions? Before I could ask precisely that, he continued, I'd forgotten. Repressed it, I guess, but I'm starting to remember their funeral now. It's strange. The only adults there were Mum, Dad, Dad's parents, and one woman I don't know. You're trying to tell me you forgot an actual funeral until now? I asked, fed up with being left in the dark by everyone in my family. If I had to go through this mess, I at least wanted to understand it. Yes, Max. Geez, I'm not trying to mess with you, I don't get it either. I was a child too when it happened, the memories are fuzzy and I forgot until Grandpa talked about it. I had told you that I'd started remembering the third child, didn't I? Yes, I mumbled. At the same time, I kept trying to reach someone. Mum, Dad, Jacob. Maybe we should call the police? I asked after a while. I don't know why I didn't think about that before. It almost felt as if the outside world and authorities didn't exist. Luke shook his head. We don't know how unpredictable Mum and Dad are. I need to talk to them. Yeah, okay. Luke started nervously tapping the driver's wheel. What's the first memory that you ever had? He asked. Like, the very first thing you ever remember. I thought about it for a while. It's hard to say because, as I mentioned earlier, most of my memories were mixed with what I saw in the tapes. In the regular ones. I'm not sure, I said, although I did have one very early memory that I was sure was not from the tapes. It's one of me and Luke. We were at home, it was night. Back then we still shared a room. There was a lot of shouting coming from outside. He came over to my bed and closed my ears with his hands. But I couldn't say if it was real or if my mind had fabricated it, and Luke was already on edge with everything, so I didn't tell him. Instead, I told him about something else I remembered which I now think could have a meaning. I remember a man visiting us once, a weird man. He was dressed in purple and yellow and had a very shrill voice. Luke bit his lip, the same way he already did as a kid when we were playing board games, and he thought thoroughly about his next move. We were wearing those same colors in that birthday video, he said. I nodded. But it couldn't have been around the same time. You were too young in that tape. What's your first memory? I asked him. Your birth. I think I was happy. We didn't talk much for the next hour or so, we were both lost in thought. I was trying to remember as much as I could from my childhood, and I think Luke was doing the same. His expression darkened more and more the longer he was silent. I had to ask him about more of his memories, but I decided to do it later, after he got his daughter back and knew that she was safe. As we finally pulled into the driveway of our old childhood home, we discussed our game plan. We'd start normal and calm, we'd let ourselves in with my key. We wouldn't shout or cause any trouble, but act like nothing was up. Mum and Dad had no idea what we'd been up to or how much we knew. Before we could do any of that, Mum got in the way though. She'd already opened the door as we approached with a bright smile on her face. Boys, you're back. And just in time as well, we were just sitting down for dinner. How are you acting this normal? I blurted out, forgetting that we'd planned to do the same thing and that Mum hadn't been with us these past hours. She had no idea about all the disaster scenarios that were going through our heads. She answered me in the shape of an eye roll. "You're so dramatic, Max, sometimes I really wonder why you weren't picked. Maybe if you were better." She stopped herself by clenching her fist. "Unimportant," she continued. "Come in." Luke shoved her to the side and shot through the door. I quickly followed, leaving the door open behind me. Our home has an open design with few doors, so you can quickly skim through the kitchen and living room. There was no one around. "Where are they?" Luke shouted. "Not up here." Mum shook her head and pointed her fingers down. "Stay here," Luke said as he walked towards the basement. Mum quickly followed him, making small jumps with each step. Ignoring my brother's instructions, I went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and followed them to the basement. Of course, I had absolutely no idea what to expect down there, but at the end of the day, it was my family. And at the very least, I wouldn't leave my brother alone. They had redecorated the basement. All the boxes with stuff were shoved in one corner. In the middle of the room was a table, our old garden table probably, with an orange plastic cloth that had balloons on it. The table was set with plates, cups, and napkins, all in sets of 6. In the middle there was a big plate with one of those huge silver covers that you sometimes see in hotels in movies, or maybe in real ones too. My dad was sitting on a small plastic chair. Mum stood next to him. "Where are they?" Luke shouted. Mum and Dad shot each other a look. "Who?" "I'm not fucking playing. Where are they?" "If you're talking about our son-in-law and our granddaughter, they went home around 10 minutes ago after Jacob helped us set everything up," my father explained calmly. "Our basement consists of 2 rooms. The big one that we were standing in at that moment, and a smaller one connected by a closed door. I walked towards it, but Mum got in my way. My hands went to the knife that I had hidden in my back pocket." "You're telling me Jacob helped you with— What the hell even is this?" Luke wasn't shouting anymore, but his voice had a low tremble. Even with parents like ours, family normally means safety. The situation was absurd and quite frankly frightening. It didn't feel like reality anymore. Everything seemed to happen ultra-fast and simultaneously in slow motion. "It's a surprise party. Don't act like we can't talk to our son-in-law. Jacob loves us." "No, he doesn't," Luke hissed. "And we love our little Ellie. She was playing the whole time." "Luke, honey, call him if you don't believe us." Now Luke was moving towards us, stopping dangerously close in front of Mum. "We've been trying to call him for hours," I chimed in, but at the same time I remembered that there was never any service down in the basement. "Luke, go upstairs and try to call him." I gave him a look that meant that I was fine down here. He hesitated for a second but then ran up. As soon as he was gone, the eyes of my parents were glued to me. Both had massive grins on their faces and then shouted, "Revival time." Dad got up and led me to the table, gesturing for me to take a seat. "Stop this madness now. Why are you doing this to us?" My voice cracked, tears shooting to my eyes. I had finally reached the point where I just felt hurt. Mum started stroking my hair the way she used to when I was little. We didn't do anything. You did this, Max, when you couldn't perform well enough," she said. "What?" They didn't answer, but started rearranging things on the table until we heard Luke coming down the stairs. "They're both home and completely fine. First, he had no service and then his battery was dead. Come on, Max. Let's go." "No," Mum shouted. "Not yet. You wanted answers, right? And we want to have dinner with you. If you stay, we will talk," Dad added. Luke and I exchanged another look, and then, to my surprise, my brother proceeded to sit down. This was our family after all. My mother sat down, took a deep breath, and started speaking. Shortly after Luke was born, friends of ours told us about an upcoming project. A television show for children on the surface, but so much more below that. An opportunity to change everything in this world. But the project was only at the start, it would take more than a decade to evolve completely, which was perfect. We had all this time to prepare and become a part of it. The company behind it sent us instructions regularly, little clips we were supposed to film of Luke, and when Max was born of him too. But my mother stopped speaking, disappointment written on her face. Neither of you made the cut, my father continued. You didn't seem to be right enough. But then little Lee was born, my brother's son. We babysat him at times and took some footage. They loved him. My mother took over again. When his parents died, she said with no emotion in her voice, we were sad of course, but also thrilled because we thought we could adopt him. But your awful grandparents took him away from us. Mum and Dad now looked at each other and smiled, in unison they spoke, but it didn't matter. He was cast, and when the show was ready, they would find him and a way to get him on it. He was 11 when it started, and everything went perfectly. We even watched the show with you a few times. We wanted it to be you boys, but at least little Lee was family. Luke and I looked at each other, more confused than ever. Our parents had officially lost their minds. Can we talk now? I asked. Fuck it, I will, because you're not giving us real answers, you're making the situation only weirder. What's up with this creepy-ass child's birthday dinner? Why are there 6 sets of dishes? They both grinned. Because we have fantastic news, there will be a reboot. My father almost screamed. Luke's eyes shot open. You're not doing any of this shit with Ellie, do you hear me? I'll get both of you arrested. They both shook their heads. No, she's much too young. The new show will start very soon this time, my mum said. The thing is, the show has an adult protagonist and the last one recently died. Isn't that fantastic? Luke got up and called out, I'm done. Both of you need psychiatric help. If you're ready for that, I might contemplate talking to you again. I moved up as well, following him toward the door. But then he stopped all of a sudden. Wait a second. The show. It's that Adventure Time thing, isn't it? Both my parents smiled again and nodded. Didn't Max run away after watching that? What? I asked, but before I could get an answer we were interrupted by the sound of a loud thump coming from the room next to this one. I heard a low voice whispering, "Help! Who's in there?" I shouted. My father answered. Our star.
That is the third part of the story. Who is the star being referred by their father? Who it might be? Is it someone else or Lee? To be updated on the release of the next video, subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell to receive all the updates from us. Please like and share this video, as well. Thank you for your stay and see you in the next video.